All right, everybody. We got another very special guest for you all this week. The first guest of 2024. So, you know, you got to do good. Everybody, welcome to the show, Dave Baker. Welcome, Dave.
Hey, 2024, the adoring public.
You're setting the tone for the year, my friend. So, yeah, you
Don't
better
fuck it
bring your
up.
A
Don't fuck
game
it up.
today.
Be a chill guy. Be a chill guy.
Yeah, no dicks allowed here. But
Yeah, exactly. No, for real though. I said it before we started recording, but thank you for taking the time to do this. It's very nice of you. Indie comics need all the help they can get, especially weirdo bullshit like the stuff I make. So, I don't want to come into your house and not appear grateful, because I am very grateful.
I'm appreciative of all that. I'm always appreciative of anybody that comes on the show and talks comics with me. So, with that, we got to do your origin story. So, what got you into comics? Do you know what your first comic was? All that. What led you to this moment?
So I'm originally from Arizona, and as a little kid, I was obsessed with kind of boy adventurer, girl adventurer stories. Trixie Belden, Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, Boxcar Children, that kind of stuff. I was obsessed with specifically Nancy Drew. I love Nancy Drew, and as a little kid, I just blasted through all those books, or rather, my parents and babysitter had to read them to me on repeat. And so after, the umpteenth dozen time of, The Mystery in the Clock's Walls or whatever, my mom was at the local library with me, and she was like, "Do you guys have anything that's kind of similar to this, but not Nancy Drew? Because we've read these like 500 times." And some unknown librarian to me changed my life forever, because the person, whoever they are, man, woman, I don't know, they suggested The Adventures of Tintin by Hergé to my mom. And for some reason, this Tucson, Arizona library had a full library of full catalog of every Tintin bande dessinée. And it blew my mind. I was like, this is the greatest fucking thing ever. There's a
If I could
talking
jump in,
dog.
what year is this?
When
Roughly.
I was a kid, so in the 90s, um,
That's that person's a superhero. In the
for
90s to
real.
have a bunch of comics in the library, that is unheard of.
Yeah, it was a really good library. They also had a really strange VHS tape collection that was like filled with conspiracy documentaries and like Bigfoot sighting documentaries and weird stuff. Like, this is before conspiracy theories were like, cancer for your brain. It was when they were fun. Maybe there's an ape man,
And that's where Dave first saw Loose Change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Look, man, jet fuel. Yeah. I mean, we should be careful about what we say on here. YouTube will demonetize you.
If I can't make a good Loose Change joke, then I don't know what
Yeah,
I'm
it's
doing
not
here.
worth it. Yeah. The loose change that YouTube is gonna pay you is not worth the. But yeah, I mean, that's basically, Hergé and Tintin specifically changed my life. I was like, this is the greatest fucking thing since sliced bread. I want to do this. And then from there, I kind of got into, whatever was accessible. So it was like mainstream superhero stuff, and then from there, indie stuff, and then from there, manga and more bande dessinée. I think the first single issues I had were like at some do you remember Walden Books? It was like a Borders
Yes.
subsidiary or something. Like they had like remaindered packs. So I think like during the speculator boom in the 90s, when comics would just sell like gangbusters, random issues would get put into these like kind of shrink wrapped compendiums of like 5 or 6 issues and then sold to bookstores. And so I had an X-Men one of those that was like uncanny in the mid 300s or something. It was when they were rehashing Days of Future Past, and I remember one issue was like, for some reason the whole issue was, it was drawn by Salvador Larroca. I know that now as an adult, but at the time I didn't. So it was a Larroca and I want to say Claremont, but I don't know if he had left the book at that point. And the whole thing is Professor X thinking stuff to himself while on trapeze, like, swinging on trapeze, and he's like shredded, right? He's just like fucking just ripped with his legs belted together, like fucking, and like the whole time I was like, this is what comics is? This is weird. What is this? So it was like I got a remaindered pack of that and a remaindered pack of Spider-Man comics where it was during the Identity Crisis run where Peter Parker had created 5 different alternate personas for himself because Spider-Man was wanted for murder. They've now those identities have now since been given to other people and they're referred to as the Slingers. Prodigy, Dusk, Hornet, Ricochet. Is it 4? I thought there was 5. Prodigy, Dusk, Ricochet, Hornet, whatever. It's those 4 and maybe a 5th one, but I'm pretty sure it's those 4.
I'm not a big Spider-Man guy, but let me just say the Slingers, that is some stuff that only comics can provide, man.
No shit, right? Yeah, no shit. Yeah, it's funny too because like they all, the idea is that because Peter is in hiding, all of the characters use only like 1 or 2 of his powers. So like Ricochet is basically Superboy. He has like a leather jacket with R's on it, and he throws the R's like batarangs. Hornet is like a biomechanical winged apparatus suit that he kind of just like pretends that he can fly by jumping around. Prodigy is basically Superman. He's like a yellow costume with a big silver faceplate and a red long cape, and it's the same thing. He just like jumps like Golden Age Superman. And then Dusk's whole thing is that he has a suit that can turn invisible. So Spider-Man jumps off of stuff and then like glides using his like web. It's like a squirrel suit. It's like an invisibility squirrel suit, basically. And this was very confusing and strange to me as a kid because I was like, "Where is Spider-Man?"
The
name of the book
Spider-Man.
is Spider-Man. Who the fuck are these jabronis? Like, where is Spider-Man? Yeah. But those were the first superhero comics I read, and initially I was like, these are cool. I think I liked the idea of comics, like North American comics, more than I actually liked the comics because I loved Tintin so much. Because Tintin is so accessible and so crystal clear in its storytelling, and that Franco-Belgian grid is just so readable as a child. Where a lot of the oh, it's a sideways panel and then another sideways and then it's just this. Oh my god, is like as someone who isn't familiar with the medium, sometimes that can be confusing. And now that's the stuff that gets me excited. But as a 6-year-old or whatever, I was like, what does this mean?
As a 35-year-old grown-ass man, I still at times am like, is this a 2-page thing? Like, where? Oh,
yeah.
And I read it twice just to make sure I get it right. So,
yeah.
And I'm a nerd for like when you find artists do your crazy panels stuff. I love it. But at the same time, like there's such an art to how you lay it out to make sure that a reader like myself can actually follow it. So
yeah, I mean, I think there's also just something about especially that factory farm version of mainstream comics. And I worked on Star Trek. I'm not it is what it is. Like sometimes there's a deadline and you've been given a page from the artist that isn't exactly what you wrote, or that you didn't write something for because there wasn't a licensor approval for X, Y, or Z. So you have to fix a problem. And I feel like a lot of that stuff that you're talking about where it is just real. Like I remember I think there's an issue of the Jonathan Hickman Ultimates run, which look, I love that run. And I think Hickman is amazing. And I think the medium is lucky to have him. But he too falls prey to the system at times. And there's an issue, I think it's of his run, or it might be the Sam Humphries stuff, I'm not sure, where a bunch of the Ultimates are like jumping out of a plane and they're having like an expositional conversation. So it's a double page spread of them leaping through the air, and then it's like, all right, so we got to go over here and do this and stop that guy over there, and then, don't forget this thing over here. Yeah, we'll do it. Don't worry. And you're like, I don't know what happened here, but this is definitely like, the wheels, they need to keep on turning,
Yeah, definitely. There was a book I actually read this week, and I'm not gonna call anyone out 'cause it's a book I really like, but they did 2 pages, 5 panel layouts. So long top panel, and then 4 square panels on both pages. And literally the way the art is done, because it's all one scene, you're not sure if you go across and then down, or if you
Mm,
do page then page. And that's the one
yeah,
kind of I was referring to earlier, where I was like, okay, and I read it like 2 times because I'm like, which is the correct way? And
yeah,
once you get the flow of the conversation, it was good. But I think, like you said, we're talking about a weekly book, an independent book at that.
yeah.
I'm sure there was some limitations given to it.
Yeah, it just happens. Like, it's just
Yeah.
part of it's the cost of doing business, Like, there's so many people working on these projects and so many projects at the companies and so many companies in the industry and so many readers, or not enough readers, so the money isn't good, so there's not enough editors, so there's not enough creatives, so there's not enough, page rates, so everybody's constantly underwater, just churning, 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 and it's, you know, those minor if we gotta live with a few minor kind of inconveniences, but we still get comics as a medium in North America, I think it's fine.
I mean, I feel like this happens in every industry that's
Yeah.
commercialized, which is all of our industries. But in a creative field, like, even I'm gonna have a hard time really pulling off the top of my head, but even your favorite movie of all time probably has that one thing. They're like, wait, why is that there? Or
Oh,
like
man. Lord of
a
the
show I
Rings.
listen to all the time, they did a whole segment that was about stuff that kind of got into the movie and shouldn't have. And it's like usually it's an extra doing something crazy in the background. And
Totally.
they're just like, this shot costs like 10 grand to shoot. Fuck the dude doing the thing in the background. Let's just
Yeah.
move on.
I mean, even, that stuff is in Lord of the Rings, like, the scene where Boromir's dying, in the over Aragorn's shoulder, Boromir's hand is up on Aragorn's shoulder, and then on the reverse, over Aragorn's shoulder, Aragorn's arm is down. But nobody remembers that because it's such an emotional, you're there with the characters. You feel Boromir's regret. You feel, Aragorn's disappointment in that moment. And Sean Bean and Viggo Mortensen are just acting their asses off. But the fact that a guy's arm is up and down alternately in these
Yeah.
shots is just like, it is what it is. It
It's
is what it is.
distracting on your fifth, sixth viewing of it, but
Yeah, yeah. On your first, you probably don't notice, but on your
yeah.
12th viewing, yeah, it's definitely there.
But it's one of those things, like any artistic endeavor has mistakes along the way. I mean, no endeavor, period, let alone artistic endeavor, is perfect. There's
Yeah,
flaws that make it great. So you can bring these stuff up, and I'm somewhat of a critic to the industry, so like I notice these things a little bit more, but that doesn't take away from my, like, the book I brought up is one of my favorite books out right now, but this one thing was like really stood out in that one
yeah.
issue. So
Yeah, I mean, and,
yeah.
and and frankly, a lot of the development of style and personal aesthetic and, just a general vibe of someone's work comes from their mistakes.
Mhm.
As an artist, your style is your limitations forced up against your will, and that push and pull is what hopefully makes your work interesting.
Yeah. So I was going through kind of your career so far in the industry, and you brought up that you did Star Trek stuff. I saw you've done a lot of independent, a lot of stuff with is it Top Shelf or Top Cow? I get those two mixed up.
Top Shelf. Yeah, Top Shelf is
Top Shelf.
the publisher that's putting out my new book, Mary Tyler Moorehawk. Yeah.
Okay. I saw you did a few things with them. I mean, have it seems like you veered more towards the independent space, and I'd like to hear, like, was that always what you wanted to do? Is that kind of a means to an end? How do you feel about the independent space that you're in right now?
I mean, I think, yeah, I think it's kind of spans the gamut, right? Like, I've
Hmm.
worked at IDW and worked on Turtles and Star Trek, and then I'm also doing, kind of indie stuff with, my frequent collaborator Nicole Gu. We had a book come out through Dark Horse, which got nominated for an Eisner, and have published multiple graphic novels together at smaller companies and self-published graphic novels.
Hmm.
And then, like last year, I had a book come out through Simon and Schuster, which is a big top 5 book market publisher, and it got translated into French, and we went and lived in France for 3 months and did a tour, and then went and lived in England for a while, and she had a book come out through an English publisher while we were there, so she did a little signing thing. So I think that there's an evolving definition of what is and isn't independent these days, because I think the idea that Marvel and DC are mainstream is just not accurate anymore. When you look at things like Raina Tegelmeier and Dave Pilkey and these kind of massive young adult and middle grade graphic novels that are selling this as much as manga sells in the States, it's so insane.
Yeah. I always bring up when people talk about the industry, I discuss a lot about Dogman because
Totally.
not that I read Dogman and nothing against it. It's not for me.
Yeah, it's not aimed at you. Yeah.
But I read a lot about the behind the scenes of it and everything. And I'm like, dude, I'm telling you, in like 10, 12 years, whenever these kids grow up, like the Dark Knight of Dogman's coming. Like that's gonna be what everybody's inspiration is, because those books sell so much.
Yeah.
But I guess my question, to phrase it better, would have been to say creator owned.
Oh yeah, I mean that's definitely that's something that's very important to me. I am very passionate about owning my work. I'm sure you're aware that the comic book industry, and specifically the direct market, has a very negative track record of how it treats artists and how almost everyone has been screwed over. I like last year for my birthday, I went to, or no, not last year before, I went to Jerry Siegel's grave, and like that guy did not get what he deserved, and it's a real shame. It's a real shame. They sold the rights to Superman for $134. Like that's crazy. I'm not necessarily adverse to working in a larger system. Obviously, I have, like I said, Star Trek, Ben 10. I worked on an Alien versus Predator TV show that will never see the light of day. I've done a bunch of stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But to me, the most important thing is creating things that I think are cool and that I own. And I think that that's a pretty apparent running theme in Mary Tyler MooreHawk. There's a lot of not so subtle commentary and metatextual kind of dialogue around how creators, how it is in some ways a fallacy, because when you create something and put it out into the world, it's no longer yours, and the public owns it, and the public interprets it, and the public receives it in a way that you can't control. While also, there's a difference between that dialogue and then the literal contractual push and pull of larger companies coming in and strip mining you away from your idea, which is, a fairly common thing in the history of comics, which is really regrettable and a really shameful aspect of this medium that I personally think is the greatest medium in the history of mankind. But it's a real black mark, I think. And the sad thing is it's still happening today. It's just happening in a different, more subtle way, where it gaslights creators into not betting on themselves and signing deals where they only own 50% of a project that they create, which is really 25% because it's half for the artist and half for the creator. Or I misspoke. I don't think that. Half for the writer, half for the artist, who are co-creators. It's a bummer.
A while back, I forget the actual documentary, but Marvel put out some documentary, and it was about Stan Lee and the beginning of Marvel and everything.
Yeah.
And there was this interview. Well, so they shared the interview that like everybody's heard a million times, where Kirby's on some radio show and Stan calls in. But then prior to that, they had a recording of him talking about creating the Marvel Universe and creating Spider-Man, all that stuff. And Stan's very real opinion, and I disagree with him, but I do kind of understand where he's coming from. I just think he's wrong. Was that, well, I came up with the idea. I told these guys what to do, so I'm the creator. And I was like, but you didn't. Like, they would just be a thing if somebody else didn't come in and draw them, man.
Yeah.
Do you not understand that?
And also, saying somebody come in and draw it isn't even an accurate representation of what the creative process was like.
Mhm.
You know, you can't copyright an idea. Like if I had an idea for Tomato Man, I can't just go copyright Tomato Man. There has to be demonstrable executional pinpoints that I'm saying, oh, Tomato Man is 4'7" tall. He is shaped very round like a tomato. He has bright red skin, and he thinks that he's a superhero, but in fact, he's actually an anthropomorphic fruit man from another dimension. And without those things, you can't copyright it. And Stan's version of this, which I understand why they were doing it this way, but he didn't do any of that. He just said, make a character named Spider-Man. And then Jack Kirby created a character named Spider-Man. Stan didn't like it, so they threw it out. Then they went to Steve Ditko and said, create a character named Spider-Man. And Steve did. And maybe Steve may or may not have ripped off the Ben Cooper Halloween costume. I don't know if you know about that story, but that's very interesting to me. And then that was the Spider-Man now. But who wrote that? Steve Ditko wrote it. He's the one who broke down the story. He's the one who drew the panel by panel storytelling. And then Stan used that as a framework to add dialogue. And I think in some cases, Stan's contributions to these things are immense. Spider-Man being one of them, because he had the editorial oversight to be like, no, it's not the Kirby thing. And also to take what Ditko gave him and reshape it. But in other instances, most instances, in my opinion, but I think you could have a dialogue around that, Stan was an air traffic controller. And in some places, he didn't even have anything to do with it. Like, he's credited as the co-creator of Doctor Strange. There's now 2 $500 million movies and who knows how many sequels featuring Doctor Strange. And there's a letter column in Journey into Mystery or Tales of Suspense, whichever one it is, where he literally says, we got a new character coming up. His name's Doctor Strange. I don't think it's going to work. It's Steve Ditko's idea. We're going to put it out. We'll see what happens. In fact, I believe the exact quote is, "'Twas Steve's idea, period." Like, so in that case, even if he did do the dialogue, he shouldn't get credit for the end thing. But I think it's a nuanced conversation that I think a lot of people in the mainstream sphere don't want to have. And corporately, Marvel is disincentivized to encourage. Which is unfortunate. It's very unfortunate.
Well, it's something, I mean, there's been a lot of conversation and some of it toxic, some of it productive about the quality of, especially mainstream comics, quote unquote, today, and how they keep reusing the same character. And we talk about on the show, like every Batman writer, artist team up has to do a Joker story. You know, every Spider-Man team has to do a Green Goblin story, and so on and so forth. And we're not really getting as many new characters anymore unless you get someone young and just ready to do something big to make a name for themselves. And all of this is part of it, because at the end of the day, why would name a creator, but why would Chip Zdarsky come in and make the next great Batman villain? He's not going to own it.
Yeah.
And he's not going to get anything out of it.
Even if he didn't own it, the residual contracts are so one-sided that, you know, that's the reason why in the 90s a bunch of those characters got created. Venom, you know, Deadpool, fucking Cable, Domino, all the Liefeld stuff, you know. Like, they got, I'm not going to say good deals, but they got nice incentives to create new works, where I think both companies, to varying degrees in different ways, have disincentivized the creation of new things because it behooves them to constantly have a rapid turnover of the same type of creator, as opposed to treating people with a little bit more faith in their ideas. Because it's not the thing, that the fallacy of the direct market is that anything succeeds. It's not that anything succeeds. Specifically in the direct market, it's all arbitrage and just slow failure. Everything is failure. You're never building. You're always decreasing readership. The age of the audience is aging out. The characters have been around for 100 years in that big two system. They're not focusing on new things because the audience doesn't want new things, because the audience has been trained for 3 generations to purely buy off of existing patterns and nostalgia. Again, maybe something that's in my book. And so there's an entrenched dogma around preserving a status quo. And I think a lot of the conversation that you're referencing that's been happening externally of, oh, maybe things aren't so good in the direct market, maybe the big two are dying, is purely in service of an aegis that may or may not have existed for the past 40 years. Like this kind of sword and shield that so many of these people claim as an identifying marker, as the fandom that they belong to, in one way or another has been declining for the last 2 generations, and they've just been slowly propped up by various ancillary business practices, whether that be the speculator boom of the 90s or the false hope that comics could be pushed to a mainstream audience in the 80s, or in the 2000s, this decompression that kind of artificially expanded everything to make it seem like there was enough readership to support everything as a resurgence from the bankruptcy of Marvel. And I think I like a lot of the stuff that's come out from all of those different generations of work. And I think that there's a lot of really interesting people that have worked in the medium in those various pockets. But how many of them are still working today is very few and far between, because the industry doesn't place primacy on building creators as stars anymore. The industry and the readership gets tired because creators aren't allowed time to metaphorically be in the kitchen. So you can't have a new graphic novel every 5 years or something, where like a movie where it's every 2 years, or you can't have a creative team on one book that ships monthly because the declining readership numbers and the way the direct market works. Single issue sales have been de-incentivized over the past 20 years, and print prices are insane. So why the fuck would you stick with a book when it costs $6 for 20 minutes of entertainment? That's insane.
Yeah. And I've heard so many stories throughout the years, and listened to so many interviews of creators throughout the years of just like the amount of time spent on working on, because one book, and I feel the most bad for artists in this industry, excuse me, because they can really only, like, a very good deadline driven artist, 11 issues is like really, really good on one book. Most are getting like 8 to 10, understandably so. And it's not cutting it any, like it's not paying the bills is what I'm trying to say. Like, where at least a writer, and that's why you see someone like, I'll bring him up again, Chip Zdarsky, who made it big with his artwork, especially in Sex Criminals, and then made the jump to writing because now he can do X amount of, I think he's doing like 4 or 5 right now.
Yeah.
You can do X amount of books and try to pay the bills. But even then, you're working 10, 15 hours a day to get stuff going. So it's
also like a strange thing. And I don't have the fucking answer to this, but it's a strange mirage too, that you're told work in the big two, build your name, then leave, and a certain percentage of that audience will follow you to independent work.
And I believe that used to work.
It used to. Because I don't know. I don't know if we live in that world anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, I still read Ed Brubaker because I've met him at Marvel, like as a creator, and he was doing Captain America and all these great books. And then I was like, oh, what's this book Criminal he's doing? And ever since then, I've picked up everything he's done. So that used to work.
Yeah, I love, and there's that's not even saying that the work is bad. I don't think the work is bad. I just think that the entrenched dogma, as I was previously talking about, is just, it's spiraling up even more. And also, I would be as you know, there's no sell-through data for the direct market. It's only shops ordering that we have access to. And even that's kind of goosed a lot of the times. Whereas publishers give away books for free and then count it as orders, which is cool. I think that that's a great idea to get people aware of your project. I wish more publishers used that tactic. But it's also just not the same as sales. You know what I mean? Like, how many of the 100,000 copies of X book are making it into readers' hands? 70,000, 60, 50, 20,000? I have no idea. And nobody does, which is the point, because the point isn't to foster readers. It's to create a smokescreen that the intellectual property behind the book is valuable, and then flip it to Hollywood. Which it'd be one thing if there was only a couple companies doing this, but every company does it, and every creative team is doing it because it's the only way to try and manufacture some sort of hype and longevity for your projects. And I don't judge anybody from doing it. I just wish we didn't have to. I wish that there was a readership that that wanted to read comics, not collect variant covers. And sometimes you can do both. Sometimes you have a book that is a hot variant speculator book that the weight of the sales heat from this drags the readership numbers up and allows it to continue over time. Like, a bunch of books that are at Image right now. And sometimes it doesn't work, and it just is what it is. You got to use every avenue available to you as a creator, I suppose.
Yeah, and I wish personally that it worked the way it works in Japan with how their adaptations affect sales, because I've read a lot about. I mean, I've been like a passive manga reader for most of my life. Like, I've Dragon Ball Z and all the stuff you expect like someone my age to have watched and then eventually read. And then over the past 2 or 3 years, been digging more into like other stuff, and I've paid attention to industry, and there is a true jump when an anime is announced.
Yeah,
where they actually get real sales on the manga. We don't really
the
get
contracts
that.
are also structured completely differently as well. Like, most North American contracts are 50-50 in terms of the print side of things, the publishing rights, the cost of printing, and then any profits that are generated get split 50-50, the publisher and this is a vague generalization, this isn't everybody, but that's usually the print side of things. And then the film and TV media rights side of that, pick your poison. There's a bunch of different publishers who do it a bunch of different ways. Usually the publisher tries to take some ownership, whether that be 10 or 20% or 50 or 60% of if there is a film and TV adaptation. Whereas in Japan, the mangaka owns everything, and they get paid purely 10% gross, not net. So however many copies that tankobon sells, they get 10% of every dollar, period, which sounds like it wouldn't be as good, but it's infinitely better. Granted, it's apples and oranges because you have to produce 18 pages a week as a mangaka, which is like, that's intense. It's a lot of pages.
Yeah, and I've been trying to make sense of how they do things, because I hear a lot about their, like, they have assistants and they have like a bunch of people that are making those 18 pages. So I don't know if it's exactly the same. And plus, we're talking about basically a 4-panel layout as opposed to American comic. So there's differences, is what I'm saying, and I don't fully understand how it works.
Yeah.
So I am really curious if that 18 pages a week is the same as
it's
an issue
more.
of.
It's 100% more.
It is more.
It's crazy. Yeah. Because here's the thing. While some pages are more decompressed, absolutely, you still have to do them all, and you have to tone everything. So it's not colored, it's toned. But the way assistants, there's like a weird gap too, where like when you're a beginning mangaka, you can't afford assistants. So you're just barreling through trying to draw 18 pages a day. And the editorial back and flow in Japan is very different as well. Sometimes, editors will get hung up on one panel and they're like, this panel is not good. You need to redraw this. And when you're doing 18 pages a week, that's like, they submit what are called names, or nemu, where it's like basically thumbnails, but they're like slightly more refined of the 18 pages. And then they meet up. I think they do that on Thursday. I don't know. There's a specific day of the week that it always happens. Then the next day they meet with their editor and they go over it, usually in person, and the editor gives them notes. The next day they redo all the nemu, resubmit it to the editor. They sometimes say yes, sometimes they say you got to change this, that, and the other. So now you've eaten up 2 or 3 days just on that. So now you have 3 work days and a weekend. So there is no weekend really. You're just churning this thing out. And if you get to the point where you can afford assistants, then you're having, usually they're split up into roles, right? Like you can really tell too, which is pretty funny. Like one of my favorite people ever, Shotaro Ishinomori, like he has a motorcycle guy and a grass blades guy and a building guy. And so he's there like drawing, the main character with the big goofy feet and the big weird nose, the like Tezuka influenced facial features. But then there's like a hyper realistic motorcycle right next to him, and you're like, yeah, fucking Ishinomori did not draw that shit. Like he didn't draw a single thing on that motorcycle.
Yeah,
If
and
you're
to be
interested
fair,
though, Chris, you should check out. Do you know about the show Manben? Manben. Do you know about this,
no,
bro? If you're interested in learning more about the manga industry or just mangaka in general, there's a TV show which is available on YouTube and Daily Motion. You just Google Manben, and it's basically inside the actor's studio, but specifically for creating manga. And it's hosted by Naoki Urasawa, the guy who draws, or the mangaka behind Pluto, Master Keaton, Billy Bat, 20th Century Boys, Urawa, Happy, bunch of stuff. Like only the greatest mangas ever made. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
All on my list. Haven't read any of them.
They're very good. I have not read all of them, but I've read a bunch of his work. And
I've been busy this week reading this.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, dude. Yeah. But basically, like, if the show Manben is every episode is Urasawa sitting down with somebody, and they film that person drawing for 2 days on whatever they're doing, and then he sits down with them and they watch the footage and discuss it over the course of an hour. And they did an episode with Takeo Saito, the guy from Goglo 13, Ryuki Ikegami, one of my favorites, Crying Freeman, the original Spider-Man manga, a bunch of stuff. Daisuke Igarashi. Yeah, they've done like, Titans. I love the show, and I specifically, I'm a huge Urasawa fan, but I also like a lot of the people that he's featured, and also found people that I wasn't previously aware of that have been on the show. Yeah, it's very, very cool. And there's a lot of discussion. They did one with Junji Ito where they go to a cat cafe because the mangaka that's being interviewed gets to choose the location. So he's like, I want to go to a cat cafe. So they're just like talking about like, oh, what was it like drawing this person being bisected by razors? And he's like, oh, well, I've always just thought that, it's adorable. It's great.
That's why a friend of mine is trying to talk me out of it because he's telling me how much the shedding is going to drive me nuts. But I've always wanted a white long-haired cat just so I could be a Bond villain on the show.
Yeah. Embrace your inner Blofeld. Are you a Bond fan?
Yeah, I love Bond. Yeah, just the movies, and then I think Dynamite's been doing a stellar job with the comics recently, and I've picked up some of the old ones. I've read all the novels. Like, I love Bond.
Have you ever read Permission to Die, the Mike Grell Pacific Bond comic? Dude, if you're a Bond guy, it's real good. It's real good. Yeah,
some of the older ones are hard to find.
It's out of print, and I don't think Dynamite has reprinted it.
I gotta think. I have a stack that I was at a con last year, maybe it's 2 years ago. Mind you, so this is the kind of psychopath I am. I literally have a closet in this house that's full of trades, manga, stuff that I'm like, ooh, I want to read this. And then I put it in the closet. And then one day, hopefully I pull it out. This, for instance, has been sitting in there for like a year.
Yeah, so, I know that. I know that life. I mean, no, I don't know that life. I don't know at all what that's like.
And somebody had a long box that just had all these random Bond comics, like trades in it. And I was like, I've never seen these before. And it was like one of those $5 a trade or whatever it was. And I just grabbed them all, and I'm sure they're in there. So I wonder if that's in there.
Yeah, I'm a huge Bond nerd too. I'm a big spy 60s spy film fan in general. When I was living in England over the summer, I went. Do you like The Prisoner? Are you a fan of The Prisoner? Bro, if you like Bond, you got to watch The Prisoner. It's my favorite TV show of all time. It's fantastic. The show is basically. Have you seen? I'm just gonna stop asking you to see things. I feel like I'm not trying to be like, have you prove your nerd cred?
Yeah,
I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to bond with you over weird spy stuff.
My spy stuff kind of begins and ends with Bond.
Oh, okay.
I always love Bond, and I'm the type of dude that when I fall in love with something, you know, for instance, Star Wars. When I was a kid, I watched Star Wars with my dad, and I fell in love with it. And then I'm not the biggest sci-fi guy, but I'm a huge
Huge
Star
Star
Wars
Wars. Yeah, I got
fan.
you.
Yeah.
I got you.
So
Okay, so I am both. I love spy stuff in general, and I also love Bond. Like I'm obsessive about
Mhm.
it. Like the Wi-Fi in my apartment is named Trevelyan. Like I'm
Nice.
obsessed. Every weird little like piece of technology is named after uh something having to do with Bond. Like my previous iPhone was called Universal Exports. You know, this one is called never mind. We don't have to keep going through it. But huge fan of Bond, and there's a TV show called The Prisoner from the 1960s, and it was made by this guy named Patrick McGowan, who was the star of this show called Secret Agent Man or Danger Man, as it aired in different countries. And the show is basically a Bond TV show. It's about a UN Security Council operative who works as a liaison with the US government to solve problems that they can't figure out. So each episode is him going to a new place, solving some sort of problem, getting somebody out of some, prisoner exchange, getting some sort of, code breaker machine, whatever. And the show was actually co-developed originally by Ian Fleming, and then he ended up leaving the project because the Bond stuff started taking off, and he thought that the original Thunderball movie that he was going to do with Kevin McClory was going to happen, so he left Danger Man mid-development cycle to do that movie. Spoiler alert, that movie never happened, and then he ended up getting sued because he published the pilot, or the film that he wrote with Kevin McClory as a novel. Kevin McClory sued him, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So this show, The Prisoner, is a spiritual sequel, but you don't need to know that. I'm just giving you way too much information at this point. It's a spiritual sequel to Danger Man. So it's a show about a spy who wakes up in a French Swiss Alps style village. And he doesn't know how he got there. He knows that he was a spy and that the people in charge of the place are keeping the residents of the village in the village because everybody there is a former spy tradecraft person. And every episode of the show is him trying to break out of the village. It's Twin Peaks. It's Lost. It's Bond all rolled together. It's amazing. It's the best fucking thing ever made. I love it. I am obsessed with it. And I went there. You can go to the village. It's called Port Marion, Wales, which is where they shot it. And it's this weird small village that this architect, his retirement project was, I don't think there's enough Venetian architecture in Wales. So I'm just going to blow millions of dollars building a Venice-style town out in the middle of nowhere. And I went there and lived there for 3 days. And you walk around and there's all the town is basically unchanged from when they shot the show. And you can go there and you can like buy this is so stupid, but you can in the town the villagers wear these weird like cape smock things, and everybody says be seeing you, and they do this hand gesture, be seeing you. And the show is very surreal and kind of psychedelic. And you bet your ass I went there and I bought one of those fucking capes. I just walked around the fucking village being like, be seeing you, be seeing you, be seeing you. It was fucking awesome. It was fucking awesome. Yeah. But we don't have to keep talking about this now. I'm sorry. I'm just excited that there's somebody else who likes Bond shit, so I can be like, fucking The Prisoner, do it!
It's written down. I'm waiting for your next recommendation to write down.
I'm sorry, man. I'll stop firing him off. I'm sorry.
You're good.
I'll stop firing him off.
No, that sounds awesome. That is one of those things, like just going abroad. My parents got to do it when I was very young because my mom actually, the company she worked for, they had to do this thing over in Europe, and my dad just kind of like hitched a ride.
Hell yeah, dude.
And I still to this day have been trying to get him to admit, he'll never watch this, so it's fine. But I've been trying to get him to admit, because he tells this story about going to Amsterdam. And he's like, I walked into one of the bakeries or whatever they call them, but like I didn't smoke anything. And every time he tells the story,
like, that's bullshit,
I'm just like,
Dad.
You're full of shit, Dad. You got stoned in that bakery, and then we all know it. Just tell me.
Yeah.
And then my sister, her husband, This is back in, she was married in 2004. I was still in high school. She's like 15 years older than me. But
Mm,
her husband was in the army and they got stationed in Germany. So she
mm,
had like 2 full years in Europe.
that's cool.
And I've left the United States once, and it was to
Where did you
Canada,
go? Where did you go?
Montreal.
Montreal. All right, that's
Yeah.
cool. Montreal's cool.
They were at least speaking a different language. I was
Yeah.
also 8 years old.
Oh, okay. Well, there's lots of
uh,
cool comic conventions in Canada. There's Toronto Comics Arts Festival in May. I'm gonna be there. You can come by. We
I
can high five.
yeah, I'm trying. So this year, because this is going to launch in 2024.
Yeah.
I am making my list of cons to go to, and Toronto's close enough. Although nowadays you need like a passport to leave the United States because we're all weird now. And Toronto's on that list because I know there's a big one there, and I have a few buddies up in that area now that have been doing this, and I've met enough people, so that's on the list. Baltimore's on my list. I really want to do that. I did MegaCon last year, so I'm going to skip that this year.
That one's in
There's a ton.
Florida. Where's MegaCon?
Yeah, in Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some, you know how things just kind of happen throughout your life. Like you meet people, and they're all just like in one area. When
Yeah.
we first started doing the show, met a bunch of people doing Kickstarters and everything. A big indie scene, and so many of them are stationed like in that area in Florida near Orlando.
Oh,
And
really?
then come to find out that like Scout Comics is around that area too. Got to know some, they no longer work there, but got to know a bunch of people that work there, and like they're all there. So, and then as it's all going, my parents moved down right outside of Orlando. So,
Man, Florida, it's calling you, man. You got to retire
yeah.
there.
Oh man, so I'm in New York, and I am still a fan of having seasons. I know
Yeah.
snow sucks, but like I'd still say it's better than extreme heat personally.
Yeah, dude.
So you're not getting me in Florida anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said up top, I'm from Arizona, bro. It's brutal out there in the summer. Fucking
Yeah.
114 and shit, and you're just like, humans shouldn't be here.
Dude, when it gets in New York, when we get to like 90s, and on those really rare occasions when it like peaks at somewhere near 100, I feel like I'm in hell.
Mm-hmm.
Literally. So for you to say 114, that I'd lose my job because I wouldn't leave the house. I'd be like, no, there's no way. There's inhumane for a human being to go out there right now.
Yep. Yeah, it's brutal. It's brutal. I'm not a fan. Not a fan at all.
So we've been having a great conversation. I've been loving it, but you are here for a reason. You've hinted a few times at it. Let's talk about the comic. So tell everybody what it's Mary Tyler MooreHawk.
MooreHawk, baby.
Yeah.
Mary Tyler MooreHawk. Yeah.
Give the pitch and let's talk a little bit about it.
Sure. Yeah. So Mary Tyler MooreHawk is a comic that I still don't quite have an effective one-liner for because this is early in the publicity cycle. So what
You don't have
usually
the
say,
it's this meets this yet?
not really. I mean, I kind of do, but it doesn't really sell it. So the book Mary Tyler MooreHawk is a 300-page graphic novel where half of it is a comic that is kind of a throwback Buckaroo Banzai Johnny Quest style comic, where we follow the titular Mary Tyler MooreHawk and her extended family of super scientists as they're attempting to stop a supervillain from an alternate dimension from committing spatiotemporal holocaust and destroying their entire universe. Then the other half of the book is prose. It's like a novel formatted in kind of zine formats where you're reading issues of a zine called Physicalist Today that take place 100 years in the future that are written by a journalist also named Dave Baker, who's obsessed with a TV show named Mary Tyler MooreHawk, which was adapted from the comics that you're reading, but canceled after 9 episodes. And so the thrust of that stuff is this journalist is convinced that there are more issues available than he's read of this comic, and that the reclusive creator of the comic may or may not still be out there. So he's on a mission to try and find this individual. And the book intersects with the two of those narratives in different ways. So it's kind of like Johnny Quest, Buckaroo Banzai. It also has a little bit of House of Leaves, Infinite Jest. David Foster Wallace is a big influence on me. I love his work. And so it's this kind of strange amalgam of both an straight ahead earnest action adventure comic and then also like the fandom and analysis of a fandom that sprung up around the comic, or maybe ahead of the comic or behind the comic, depending on how you're reading it. And so the book itself evolves over the course of it. I'm trying to talk around some things. It evolves over the course of making it or reading it rather.
So I'm guessing, as I was going through it, because as much as I appreciate it, most creators send me like 22 pages and are like, here, read this and we can talk about it. You sent me like 400 pages. So
yeah.
And I'm looking through it, and I read the first probably 80 or so pages going through it. Really enjoying what you're doing, loving like your art style and everything. And then I kind of flipped through the end and I saw the zine stuff. And I never got into the only like zine culture I got into was a little bit of the skateboarding zine culture back in my like early teenage years. But even that, like, even that I wasn't huge into. Was that like a scene that you were really into and you wanted to mimic here, or how did that part?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm a big horror punk, post punk, hardcore person. I like Riot Girl stuff, and Kathleen Hanna and Bikini Kill and all that. Those early Riot Girl zines are they're just really cool to me. And then specifically, the kind of cataloging of a dead culture after the fact by going back and finding those zines is really cool to me. And also, I am a zinester. I make zines and I go table at zine fests, and a bunch of my friends are zinesters. And I used to host a podcast called It's Pronounced Zine, where I would interview zinesters. And it's a very democratized, accessible form of communication, which I really love. It's also on a micro scale, which is kind of the beauty and the curse of it. And specifically in my book, I wanted to kind of take modern day fandom and kind of the strange ephemeraness of pop culture and how all these random projects spawn all these weird kind of side offshoot merchandising deals, and how they eventually will be lost to time, and how eventually somebody is going to be like, wow, there's a Biker Mice from Mars comic that Malibu put out, or whatever, because that's kind of what I spend my time doing. Like I love that stuff. Case in point, hey, have you read the Mike Grell Bond comic that Pacific put out? So the book kind of mimics a lot of that stuff, and it's a deconstruction of a lot of that stuff. And I'm also a big fan of a lot of these kind of like 90s literary new wave writers, like Jonathan Lethem and David Foster Wallace. I specifically love his essays. I mean, I love both Broom of the System and Infinite Jest, but I specifically love the way his essays were so revolutionary. He wrote this essay called Consider the Lobster, where he got hired by a magazine to go to, I think, Nantucket, somewhere in Massachusetts, and like go to a lobster fair. And they didn't have a remit for they just wanted to send this guy to a lobster fair and see what he would write about, because his voice was so interesting. And he had this kind of fractured narrative style where he would utilize asterisks and footnotes and give you you're reading a description of them. Then I had a lobster bisque, and then a footnote, and you go to the bottom of the page and it has all of this detail about the way and the inhumanity that lobsters are killed. They're not dead. They're alive when they're boiled. And so there's all of this formatting stuff that was really influential on me when I was reading it. He also has another essay called A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again, which is he got assigned by a magazine, I think Esquire maybe, to go on a retreat on a ship, a cruise line, right? And he was a very anxious person, and at this point newly sober. And so the whole essay is just him being like, what do people do on cruise ships when they don't drink? And so he ends up getting in this strange tit for tat hide and seek game with people like the housekeeping staff, where every time he would leave the room, there would be a chocolate on his pillow. And he started like just leaving the room, walking around the corner, and then like looking back to try and catch the housekeeping people putting the chocolates on his pillow. He drove him crazy. And the format that these emotions and this kind of mania is communicated to the reader is, like I said, through this essay called Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again, where there's this footnote mechanic where he's giving you nautical maritime history in the footnotes, and then this bizarre personal anecdote of him like playing cat and mouse with like the housekeeper. And I thought that modality of storytelling could be so easily replicated in what it's like to be involved in a fandom and have this kind of fractured idea, and you're never seeing the whole, and you're always trying to piece together like, who is this character and why was Professor X wearing belts on his legs while he was doing flips above a pool, like all of these kind of bizarre things about how we as a culture absorb these stories, and how some of these stories just completely bounce off and are forgotten, and some of them just become ingrained in our cultural history, was something that was really interesting to me. And I wanted to do something about both a creator being lost in the creation and also a creation lost in a public that has no space for story anymore. Because in the future, in this world, physical objects are outlawed, which is why the zines are called physicalist today. They're kind of a newspaper-esque of thing about the collecting world in the future. And so our main character in the journalism sections goes to these weird underground swap meets, and he's like rifling through back issue bins, and like cops are showing up and like trying to burn everything because physical objects are outlawed after a big kind of political turning point in our country in the near future. And I don't know, I just got obsessed with it, and I started making this thing, and it wasn't supposed to be 400 pages, but it just became that.
Dude, it fascinates me listening to you tell that whole story, because I feel like we probably grew up in, I mean, we're states apart, worlds apart, to be honest, but we probably grew up going to similar concerts, listening to similar bands in similar crowds.
Totally.
And your experience, and this is one of the things I loved about being in the punk rock scene, skateboarding and everything back in those days. Your experience in that scene is so much different than mine.
Oh, really?
Because we went,
in what way?
In that you were focused on all these, like the zine and in kind of the human condition, and doing all these things that you were doing with that section of it, where my version of the punk rock scene back in the day was, first of all, it was skateboarding. That's what got me in. And then going to these shows and like, probably doing things I shouldn't have been doing at a young age. And then that really led me down a path of politics. I mean, we're talking about, for me, peak like punk rock days are like 2000s. So we're talking George Bush era America, the war on terror and all that. I went down a political realm that I was going to anti-war rallies, and I was, fighting the man, doing all those kinds of things. And it's just, we probably would have been in similar, like if we lived in the same town, we would have been in similar circles, but went two different paths in our fandom.
Sure. Yeah.
So to speak. And that's what's so fascinating about that scene to me is I know a few people that we've gone our separate ways over the years, but I know everyone from that scene. Like some are in jail right now, some are like me and have a career and are living our lives and everything, and then there's everything in between, and some way more successful than I am, because I'm not the most successful person in the world. And it's just, as you're talking, I'm going back in my head those days and just reminiscing of it and loving it. So I love to listen to that, is one thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that there's, and this is, I also was involved in the political side of punk as well, but I think specifically in Arizona, it's a lot, this sounds like a cop-out, but it's true. It's so much more difficult to organize and politically shift the ecosystem, metaphorically, because of the literal ecosystem. Like you just it's so hard to go out, and it's not undoable. It happens. There are protests, TUSD marches out every fucking, time there's a mass shooting, and it doesn't stop anything. But they still should do it. But in Arizona, it's like 110 degrees outside. So it's like it's really difficult to get people to mass together,
Well, the joke in New York is the exact opposite. As soon as like October, November comes, the protesting stops. And I don't want to, but like a few years ago when we were seeing more violent protesting coming about for, depending on how you feel, justifiable ways, that even stopped during that time because there's snow out and nobody wants to be cold.
Yep.
And so it's similar where you would see that kind of thing happen. And then as soon as like April, May hit and, the sun's out and it's a little bit warm, to us warmer, which was like 40s, 50s. Like right now in New York, it's like in the 40s and I'm wearing t-shirts. So that tells you the life we live here.
Yeah.
It was a little more easier to do those things, but yeah. And then also to think like some of the stuff I was doing was making skate videos and like learning to edit and
totally.
That's some of the stuff that I was really into. And that even like as soon as the snow came out, like nobody's at the skate park. We're all inside playing Tony Hawk or whatever, doing whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's something about both as a political apparatus and just as a means of self-expression. There's something about the lack of barrier of entry for zines that is just it's the best. It's the best. You scrawl, I don't like this sucks on a piece of paper, you flip it over, you put a painting on the front, and now it's a zine. And then you go to Zine Fest and you trade zines or you sell your zines or whatever. And the harder part about it is that it's a very localized experience, almost literally localized. There's like 2 or 3 distribution mechanisms for zines, and they're very specific, right? And that's difficult. It's difficult to amass it's like the tape trading circuit, right? It used to be a huge thing, or the anime, tape trading circuit in the 90s and 2000s. Like it used to be this huge thing, or DVD trading. It used to be huge. It's just not anymore. Because why would it be? Because now you have Twitter, right? And that's a whole separate conversation. But you know what I mean? Like there's something about typing a tweet is not the same experience and doesn't unlock the piece of your brain that creating something and going to the Xerox machine at school or in a 2 a.m. at a Kinko's and making your zombie homicide zine or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's something about that process that I feel self-actualizes a large number of people that feel voiceless.
Yeah, and your comparison still works, but I think the better avenue for where that has gone is YouTube and podcasting.
Yeah, definitely.
If you go through as a student of podcasting, you go through, I mean, I could probably make a lot more money or any money. I don't make anything off this, but by going the kind of that realm and having something more of that style, because the top podcasts are usually news and politics.
Yeah.
And tend to be more niche politics at that, whether it be far left, far right, or up or down, whatever it is. So that scene kind of moved in that direction, and it's still a lot easier, but it is much more broad. And the fact that you can reach way more people with a podcast on the internet than you ever could with a zine walking down the street.
Yeah. And zines are still around. Like they're not dead. Like people 100% still make them. Me specifically, but also like there are a ton of people that, there's a great show here, the LA Zine Fest. Happens every year, and every year it's a more diverse, exciting, cool crowd of people. And every year I'm just like, fucking thank God this exists. Thank God this exists. And also I'm sad for my previous self that I didn't always have access to this. Because this while I was into it, it wasn't really a thing to a large degree when I was really young. Like they existed, but not in Tucson, like Tucson, Arizona is not the thriving hotbed of culture.
Yeah, I won't say it on air where I live, but I feel you. I'm not in New York City. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Um,
But that's something I kind
yeah,
of like. That's something that's like a background radiation of the book, right? Like there's a large portion of the book that takes place in Arizona, and then there's another part that takes place in Montana, and um, that's because it. In order to foster creative change, you need real estate, and you can't do that in a big city. Therefore, you have to be drawn to these weirder places, right? And so, to me, I wanted to make a book about what it's like to be lost in your own creation. And you can't set that in a thriving metropolis. You know, you have to the maze of the mind and the maze of creativity necessitate space, whether that be existential or literal. Therefore, large swaths of the book, specifically the the prose sections of the book, follow an extended cast of characters who are attempting to do the impossible. They're attempting to build a TV station to create an art form that at that point nobody even remembers what it is. There's a running kind of joke that like nobody even knows really what filmed entertainment is. Um, and so this character, Connie Harvowitz Kurt, is like the driving mechanism behind trying to revitalize it. And she ends up connecting all of these different people from disparate worlds and starting this production company and starting finding a way to distribute this TV show that they're going to produce, Mary Tyler Moorehawk, which is based off of comics from a person that she knew many years previously. And I don't know how deep we want to get into this, but there's some funny shit that happens there to me because it's just like you're stumbling through the act of creativity because that's how it always fucking feels. Even when I've done this like 100 times, I'm just like, I don't fucking know, man. I don't know. Fingers crossed this works.
yeah, I'm not like the most creative person in the world, but like I think we all have some sort of creative bone in our body, and I actually have something that I'm it's the first time that I've submitted something to somebody else that they're going to do that I'm not just doing on my own. And it is the most nerve-wracking thing in the world because I'm just reading it over and over. Like anything else I've made, like I have my criticisms of it and I'm like, oh, like, I don't know, like this could be better, blah, blah, but it just needs to get done. And this and that. This, I'm just like, this is shit. I don't even want to hand it in. This is shit. And
Yeah.
and it's like, it's a boy of mine too. So it's not like somebody who's going to like, it's not like I'm handing it into Marvel and they're going to be like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah. You will
No,
never work again, Chris.
yeah.
Fuck you.
But yeah, so I can understand that feeling a little bit, my little bit of understanding it. So you've been super generous with your time, but I did want to get into one more thing because we talked a lot about the story and a lot about the book and all the things going around it. But one of the other things that's really unique about this book is your art.
Oh, thank you.
So I want to bring up a page just to show everybody. So if you're listening to this, jump on YouTube and see the video version of this. But this is just one page. And I think, first of all, the choice to be, it's not a black and white comic. It's like a pink and white comic. I don't know if that's the best way to explain it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Is very unique. And then just your style too. So I don't know, go off on that, I guess.
Yeah. So
the choices that you made on here is basically what I would like to hear more about.
Yeah, totally. So the comics sections of the book are drawn in pencil. The way I draw is I do all my construction lines in red architectural pencil, and then I draw over that in just a 2B graphite pencil, pull it into Photoshop, pull out the underdrawings. And so it looks like a finished line drawing, but it takes me half the amount of time. And then I finish everything by putting a pink tone digitally on it in Procreate or Photoshop. And so the book, I would say I kind of draw in a style that's influenced by, people like Katsuhiro Otomo, I love him, but I don't know that you would necessarily see it. I feel like, Mike Mignola and Jeff Darrow and Shitaro Ishinomori, maybe Farrell Dalrymple, all people like that, I think are pretty apparent that I like that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And the story, the comics stuff follows this action adventure family. So you have kind of basic analogs of MTMH is kind of the Johnny Quest archetype. Roxy Racer is basically the Race Bannon, Roger, quote unquote, Race Bannon archetype. The cutie boy is the kind of adopted sibling. He's a robot who the more you are nice to him, the stronger he gets. So the more you compliment him, the more powerful he becomes. He's kind of like an R2D2 mixed with Astro Boy, mixed with I don't know. You're the Haji like adopted sibling archetype. And then the stepmother and a couple other Rosemary MooreHawk Cho, and then a couple other kind of adopted characters as well. That the found family is a big theme in the book, and I hope that communicates. I don't know if it does, but yeah, the way I draw is it's they're all pencil drawings, very detailed. I like drawing tons and tons of weird little lines, much to my wrist's chagrin. But yeah, I don't know.
And that's one of the things that jumped out to me was the detail, and like it's not. I'm really bad at like critiquing arcs, so bear with me.
You're not gonna hurt my feelings. Just say it, baby. Chris, just be like, I fucking hate this.
It's fucking garbage. No, I'm just kidding. It's not that it's like photorealistic detail. It's not like I'm looking at like an Alex Ross painting where like
Sure, yeah.
you see how fucking detailed and realistic it is. But like when you dive into every little line in the background, especially in this page where you've got the walls and all the little, like you said, all the little weird lines you like to draw. And I'm just like, I'm sitting there the whole time, just like, this person A loves to draw, but B put so much care into everything that like I feel like 80 to 90% of comic creators out there, and this isn't a dig, goes back to the conversation we had earlier about the realities of the industry, just wouldn't do.
Right.
And as I'm looking at it, like each page, and I think it's why it took me a little bit longer, is because I'm like looking at, I mean, I'm gonna see if I can zoom in on these like little towels hanging up in the
yeah, sure,
up here, like all of that. Like I couldn't believe that you took the time to do that in a good way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think I do. Yeah, I guess I like to draw. Yeah, I think so. I don't think I would draw 300 pages of a fucking thing if I didn't, right?
That said, though, I do feel and this, listen, I think there's times in this podcast timeline that I'm in that you could tell where I wasn't into doing the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
There's moments in my life where like things were happening and this was not a priority and not something I wanted to do. So it's not a dig on any creator. I think every creator gets this feel because they love to draw. But I think you can tell when an artist, penciler, whoever has gotten to a point in their life where maybe something's going on. Maybe their father passed away. Maybe they're going through a divorce. Who knows? But they no longer love drawing. It's just what they do to get by. Yeah. And that's what I mean by it. Like, I can tell you're still in the place where you love to draw and you love doing this every time you're working on it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that you definitely can feel that when people are not in it 100%.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the book took me about 4 years to make, and it was not an easy journey. I will be honest. The book, I think, was rejected by everyone. Like just everyone. And I can kind of understand why. It's a weird, bizarre, unconventional, theoretically non-commercial project. It's not something that's like, oh, Scott Pilgrim, it's just that. Like, I get it. It's weird. That being said, this is what I wanted to do. I thought it would be cool, and after a certain point, that passion becomes sunk cost fallacy, and you're just like, this isn't what I think I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. God damn it. I have to say, I owe Top Shelf and Chris Staros at Top Shelf a lot. It means the world to me. Excuse me. It means the world to me that Chris saw this book and was willing to bet the farm on this weird, unconventional thing. I have a deep well of gratitude for him and for Top Shelf specifically, because not only did they agree to do it in the way that I wanted to do it, they didn't really fuck with the vision. They didn't change anything. The book that it's being released is the book that I wrote, and specifically, I own it. And that's again a huge running theme in the book. The TV show MTMH. I think you can probably read between the lines and be like, maybe there's not a happy ending if a show lasted 9 episodes. So that's a running theme through the book that people should own their work. And much to Top Shelf and Chris Staros' credit, he's been supportive of that every step of the way. And it means a lot to me.
I think 2 things I want to comment on there. One, we've worked a little bit of Top Shelf over the years. Every time they send me something, I can say at the very least it's unique. I don't really like putting good and bad too much on creative works, because I do think it's more of it's for me, it's not for me.
Yeah, totally.
We talk about it in the other part of the show, but I just watched Barbie. It's not a bad movie. It's just not for me. So that's where I'm at in my life, where I'm critiquing things, where like maybe on a personal level, I could say like, I thought that was bad, but what I really mean is not for me. And when they send me something, I'm just like, man, like this may not be something that like I'm into. They sent me like some very unique stuff. And this goes on that list of like unique. And as a part of that, I've tried to find a good way to say this, and it's been tough, but like, I think this is one of those books. And I think a lot of books, I mean, a dear friend and a great comic creator, Richard Fairgray, also falls in this realm as well, where like it's great work, but it needs a special publisher or a special way to be published for it to go out. Like, I don't think any of Richard's work is going to be published by Marvel or DC or even Image or Dark Horse at that. But I think somebody at Top Shelf could do it because of the reputation they have and the fact that they're willing to take those chances. To be honest, the business side, I don't know how they're able to take these chances all the time.
Yeah.
But it's working for them. And I'm glad somebody's out there doing it, because even if it's not all for me, I'm just glad this kind of work gets out there, because it does extend the industry just that little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, last week, Publishers Weekly gave MTMH a starred review, which, if you don't know what that is, Publishers Weekly is a kind of industry magazine, and they review books and they say things are good or bad or whatever. And, about 20,000 books a year get submitted to PW, and like 500 or so get reviewed, and even less than that get a starred review. A starred review is meaning like, oh, this is truly exceptional or whatever. And the last line of their review of MTMH was that it's like this nonstop graphic novel will please and delight fans of Philip K. Dick and David Foster Wallace. And when I read that, I almost fell out my goddamn chair, dude. I was like, are you kidding me? After all of the rejection and like everyone being like, I don't know. And now Publishers Weekly is being like, it feels like David Foster Wallace, is like fucking insane to me. Because I love his work so much. And yeah, the book's not going to be for everybody. It's a weird thing. I wanted to make a fucking weirdo thing. So I have no problem being like, look, it's not for everybody. I get that. It's not. But I'm just so thrilled that the thing I wanted to make attracted somebody with the pedigree and track record that Top Shelf has. Blankets changed my fucking life. It's one of my favorite books ever, and I know Craig Thompson has maybe fallen out of favor a little bit in the cartoonist circles, but that book, it was everything I wanted when I was at the appropriate age. You know what I mean? It really spoke to me, and to have this come out through the same publisher all these years later is just fucking unbelievable to me. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I know, to kind of close it out, I know at the end of the day, this book is going to hit that kid that you were however many years ago doing all this stuff.
Hey man, from your mouth to God's ears, I don't know if it will, but I hope so.
It's going to hit at least one of them, man. Like, somebody's going to pick this up at that age, in that scene, like where you were. Maybe not Arizona, maybe it's Montana, but whatever. And this is going to be their favorite thing, because I can just see the person that picks this up. I can see the you from X amount of years ago, like in that zine culture, doing that stuff and picking up a version of this book and being like, holy shit, this is what I always wanted. This is what I always thought this could be. And yeah, and that's not only credit to you for making this very unique and cool book, but I just want to throw out the credit to Top Shelf to being like, dude, no, like, and once again, not an insult to you. You've also said it, but like, I don't think anybody else could have published this book.
Thank you, man. Yeah. I hope that you're right. I hope it does find whoever needs it, and I couldn't agree more. Top Shelf, thumbs up. Thumbs up from me.
Yes. Love me some Top Shelf. Like I said, so my like I said a million times already now, my tastes don't always align with them, but damn, am I glad they exist, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if that person is out there listening to the show, do you have someplace you want to send them? Do you still do Twitter or Facebook or anything?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to find me on the internet, you can do so at heydavebaker.com or on the socials at xdavebakerx. Or if you'd like to listen to my podcast, a deep dive explainer podcast about weird and obscure topics, you can do so by finding the Deep Cuts podcast.
And everybody out there listening and or watching, you should know the whole spiel by now, but links in the show notes, not only to Dave's website, but I found the previews order guide so that you can order it at your local comic shop as well. So click on those and get a copy.
You're a saint, Chris.
Dave, thank you so much for stopping by and spending way too much time talking to me, but I appreciate it, and I hope the book does well for you, man.
Thank you, dude. You gotta watch The Prisoner, bro. You gotta watch The Prisoner.